is the kind of event that we really need within our community. It's called Black Family Health Matters 2. I'm putting this event on because I feel that we need to be having discussions about what it is that has kept us well, what it is that has made us survive. We are the survivors because we've had a lot of people who've lost. So we need to come together to give ideas to each other about how we can make sure that that longevity is continued over a period of time. One of our concerns is that often the NHS appears not to be representative of us. And when it comes to healthcare, we seem to have a long list of things that has been affecting us historically, and we've done very little about it. We still have issues to do with blood pressure, diabetes. I can name it. The list goes on. But what we need to do, we need to be more involved in trying to see how we can survive amongst ourselves, because we've got lots of secrets as well about health. We've got the bush tea. That's something that we always used to have. You remember your mum and dad used to give you bush tea. I also remember that before we started school in the September, we were always given a dose of salts, Epsom salts, to actually clean and cleanse the body. If you look at our diet as well, our diet consists of things that are rich in vitamins and potassium and all the other sort of minerals that we really need. The green banana is excellent. The aloe vera is brilliant in terms of the hair, skin, nails, and just generally keeping fit. We've also come together to try and see if we can remember people, namely 8 women who actually wrote a book of their experiences. The book's called When Our Ship Comes In, and it was written by Chapeltown Black Women's Writing Group. And so it's still available, so I'm asking everybody to try and see if you can pick it up and have a read of it to see how much of the words that was given in 1992 are still relevant today. I think we're going to have a great time. We've got a quiz, Black History quiz. We've got some really serious food. We've got serious people, and I just thank everybody very much for coming out today and to be with us. All right, thank you.
Grew up in Leeds, did my masters in Leeds, so I'm very much a Leeds person, don't worry. I'm actually going to be talking about history today, not health, and probably history that you guys lived through. You'll probably be able to tell me more about it today. And my MA dissertation within community politics in the 1970s and the 1980s, but today I'm going to focus on the 1970s. So in this presentation, I will focus on some of the ways in which Black women cared for children and young people in order to demonstrate the role of women within the protection of community in Leeds, specifically the Black community. I will specifically focus on Black women's involvement in militancy, which was a defining characteristic of the 1970s for all British people, whether they were Black Power activists protesting in the streets or factory workers striking against poor conditions. By having this focus, I hope to change our traditional understandings of militancy and who participates in it. We often associate militancy with violence and disorder because that is how often the government and the media represents it to us. In truth, militancy does not mean any of these things. The Cambridge Dictionary defines militancy as the fact of being active, determined, and often willing to use force. So using that definition, strikes are an example of militancy. Even peaceful marches are examples of militancy because they're confrontational. And over the months recently, we have seen attempts to tarnish the reputations of ordinary workers such as train staff, nurses, doctors, teachers, people who make up our community, because they have dared to demand better from their employers. Strikes and other militant actions are essential because they have historically improved our rights, both as citizens and workers, which is why it's important for us to show solidarity rather than allow the government and the media to divide us. Especially because militancy is something that many black people in Chapeltown throughout the 1970s involved themselves in varying degrees. We need to dispense with the idea that everyone who engaged in militant action looked like this. Because as we'll see throughout this presentation, this masculine and violent image of militancy is not reflective of the reality of most black women activists in Britain. So to demonstrate how black women engaged in or responded to militant action, I will focus on 3 case studies: the Studley Grange playgroup takeover of 1972, the Cowper Street school strike of 1973, now known as Hillcrest Academy, and the Bonfire Night uprising of 1975. So in Chapeltown, Caribbean migrants often worried for their children. Not only were young black boys more likely to be stopped by the police due to stop and search laws, children often encountered racism in education from their teachers and sometimes their fellow classmates. Parents were also eager to provide a rich environment for their children in Britain. At a UCA and parents meeting in June 1973, Annette Leiber, pictured on our screen, shared a document she had written for the parents, in which she declared that in the Caribbean islands, the child was left to develop naturally, but the English way of life puts him in a completely different situation, and this was due to the deficient infrastructure of Chapeltown at the time because the community centres rarely funded them. She wrote that it was, quote, the responsibility of the intelligent mother to use all her faculties if her child is to develop its full potentials, as well as Leiber's language reflects her personal situation as a single mother in Leeds, as well as the relationship between women and children that stems from maternal Caribbean cultures and practices. However, in Britain, many Caribbean women had to balance their responsibilities as mothers along with the need to work as first-generation migrants. Therefore, despite their limited time for activism, the injustices that the children and other children were subjected to motivated so-called ordinary women, alongside men, to directly challenge the state in ways that perhaps they previously weren't comfortable with, particularly in the Caribbean. And the assumption of such maternal roles by women within the community hints at the way in which community activism is often gendered. So black women involved themselves in the Chapeltown Parents and Friend Association, which I'll refer to as the CPFA, and it was formed to challenge racism and paternalism within the Studley Grange Playgroup Committee, which many of you might be familiar with. Caribbean mothers initiated the playgroup around 1963, but white professionals from middle-class areas dominated the committee by November 1972. According to the coverage provided by Chapeltown News, a community newspaper, public demands for greater diversity within the committee were countered with warnings that funds would be cut if responsible people were not in control. Infuriated by the implication that black people were irresponsible, locals accused the committee of displaying a paternalistic attitude towards black people. The CPFA, spearheaded by Mrs. Verrill Harriott, was created to address this issue, and the organisation sometimes assumed a militant tone due to its leaders' membership of the West Indian Afro Brotherhood, which is pictured on the screen. A pro-black organisation which was described as, quote, the largest black militant organisation in Leeds. A document published by the CPFA named White Power Struggle for Control of Multiracial Play Centre criticised white liberals and conveyed the revolutionary sentiment of black power. This is a quote by the way, control of a country, a school, or, as in this case, a children's centre has got to be taken, and that's taken in capital letters there. The document persuaded a crowd of black parents to actually interrupt a meeting at the playgroup between the committee on the 24th of November. And Mrs. Harriet there criticised the committee for, quote, muzzling the power of the people, end quote. A new committee was eventually elected, with Mrs. Harriet pictured on the left as its chairperson, and Mrs. Lucilla Winter, the wife of another founder of the WIB, Mr. Trevor Winter, as the organiser, and you can see her on the right there as well. So the Chapeltown Parents Action Group, the CPAG, was a different organisation formed a year later, in June 1973. It was formed by parents who were concerned about the conditions of the local Cowper Street school, the school which most black parents in Chapeltown sent their children to. A new study by Bernard Cord had revealed the high rates at which Caribbean children were being labelled as educationally subnormal, and the success of the local supplementary schools, established by volunteers such as Mrs. Beryl Harriet and Mrs. Gertrude Paul, proved that state classrooms were in fact damaging to black children. These factors were galvanised by the fact that Mrs. Gertrude Paul, a local activist and new teacher at the school, had complained about the racist remarks that the head teacher had made about the black pupils, such as black children having reduced cranial capacities that affected their intelligence, which of course we know is not true.
Can I just say something?
Yeah?
I was at that march. I was 7.
7?
Yeah, I was 7 years old.
Thank you for letting me know that, because usually when I present this history, especially as a university student, I'm doing it in conferences in London or around the country, and now I can actually do it to a community I'm writing about, and I can hear from you and from the people who have participated in these events. So thank you. I'd love to speak to you later.
It's one of my earliest memories, standing there, being one of those children who was there at the meeting. Mr. Butler was the headmaster, and he wouldn't give us a fair shake. According to adults that I've spoken to since, we weren't given a fair chance to succeed at that school because of his racist attitude.
Definitely, thank you. So such revelations about the school inspired local radical activists Calvin Beach and Arthur France to create the CPAG. However, they made a conscious decision to not get too involved and position black mothers as the driving forces of the organisation. So Beach and France had declared that they wanted the organisation to be associated with kinship instead of radicalism, and they were getting quite a reputation for being radicals. And whereas if it wasn't associated with radicalism, they would be able to get more support within the community and also evade scrutiny from the state. So they encouraged Viola Hendrickson, formerly Violet Hendrickson, a member of the young radical arts group Uhuru Arts, to become the new secretary of the organisation. And they also ensured that older mothers at the school, who were revered within the neighbourhood, took up leadership roles too. So Mrs. Odessa Stout was a respectable married Barbadian mother who chaired the CPAG, and like most black people at the time, she did not fit the stereotypical image of the militant activist we saw at the beginning. However, later reflecting on her involvement in 1992, she recognised that black people needed, quote, to be seen and to be heard. Therefore, the new CPAG was composed of younger radicals and older, more maybe culturally conservative maternal figures who had not yet involved themselves in any form of militancy. Therefore, the organisation, led by women, represented a community united in the face of discrimination from the state, even in the form of the classroom. So regardless of their background, their age, they all came together. Black power was also frequently referenced at the meeting of the CPAG, and under the leadership of Mrs. Stout and the influence of radical activists, the CPAG organised a strike for the 25th of June, in which nearly all of the black parents withdrew their children from Cowper Street School and protested outside of its gates. Unfortunately, we have people from the strike with us today. The strike was unprecedented in Leeds, and actually quite a rare occurrence in British education across the country. The Education Department declared that they would make significant concessions only 2 days later. So if we think about how long the current strikes have been going on for, this strike only needed to last 1 day, and the department was ready to give in. And this included replacing Mr. Butler, the racist head teacher. They actually moved him to a different school. So this is an example of the left-wing militancy that, quote, just ordinary housewives, according to Calvin Beach, engaged in, as well as the usual Black Panthers that we're more familiar with. There was a line, however, which Caribbean older women drew when they involved themselves in radical activity. So the minutes of the CPAG's meetings note that Mrs. Odessa Stout declared, "We are only talking about a bad school," when young radical activist Imru Bakari, formerly Errol Caesar, suggested that they apply all Black Power principles to aspects of their lives. This suggests that many women within the CPAG perceived their engagement in militancy as temporary. In this instance, older women agreed with the use of more forceful methods to protect their children, but that didn't necessarily, for example, local Caribbean activist Mrs. Yueli Proctor, as an assistant community relations officer at the Community Relations Council, voiced concerns over the nature of the action against the school. During an interview with a local newspaper, she reportedly agreed that the racist head teacher should resign, but believed that, quote, many parents approach him wrongly. These disagreements over what constituted appropriate and inappropriate resistance against the state eventually led to big disputes between the community activists in later years. So the Studley Grange takeover of 1972 and the Cowper Street school strike of 1973 are perhaps two examples of a softer form of militancy. However, the Bonfire Night uprising a few years later was the community's first example of mass violence in the streets against representatives of the state. So on the 5th of November in 1975, hundreds of young people attacked officers on the streets of Chapeltown because the police had refused to limit their overt surveillance of black youngsters during the bonfire celebrations. 11 black boys and a white man were singled out by the police officers and put on trial as scapegoats. However, a defence committee came together to organise representation for the youngsters. Representation that included a well-known anti-racist barrister who many of you might know, Rudy Narayan. Girls had been involved in the violence of the 5th of November to a limited extent because many of them were not allowed to attend some of the bonfire gatherings, especially because the Yorkshire Ripper had just murdered his first known victim, Wilma McCann, a few days prior in Chapeltown. But the Defence Committee was mainly composed of women who had participated in the school strike 2 years ago, such as Mrs. Gertrude Paul, Viola Hendrickson, Niall Ward, and Annette Liebert. The fact that these women were not visible in the violence of Bonfire Night, but were overrepresented within the committee organised for the defence of the boys on trial, is another example of the duties of care and responsibility attached to women in the community. However, the women on the committee initially struggled to garner support within the community because many of the older Caribbean neighbours disapproved of the use of violence by the youth. It was an extreme form of militancy against the state that they were uncomfortable with. As explained by Viola Hendrickson in an oral history interview, quote, "You have to understand where they're coming from. The older generation were law-abiding, coming out of the harsh lives that they lived in the Caribbean. We, coming through as young people, would probably, maybe in naivety some of it, or feeling that sense of injustice that this isn't fair, this isn't right. We were more outspoken than our parents. So there may have been some who would not give their support to the young people because they would just see it as unruly behaviour," end quote. So the United Caribbean Association, which was the main organisation for people of Caribbean descent in Chapeltown, released a statement declaring, "We regret the unfortunate incidents on Bonfire Night." Whereas many younger people believed that the elders didn't really understand the issues of police brutality that many of the youth faced on the streets in the 1970s. Members of the Young Radical Uhuru Arts Group later challenged the softer position of the UCA with their statement, quote, "If we are attacked, then we are left with no alternative but to defend ourselves," end quote. They believed that sometimes the community needed to be militant in order to protect itself against the state. Nonetheless, it is important to recognise the older women within the neighbourhood, such as Mrs. Paul, who disapproved of the violence used by the youth, but supported those on trial regardless. While Mrs. Paul disagreed with their means of protest, these were the same children that she had taught at the UCA supplementary school, or who she had sought to protect through her concealed involvement in the Cowper Street school strike 2 years prior. She offered her house as a meeting place for the barristers and members of the Race Today collective based in London who came to report on the trial. And in her oral history interview, the fabulous Nia Ward, a member of the Defence Committee, recalled other older women in the community, such as Mrs. Adams, being, quote, very active, cooking food, making sure that the mandem had somewhere to sleep, and just generally making sure that they were safe when they were here in this community, end quote. On one occasion, the judge actually denied bail for the defendants because he believed that the charges against them were too severe. Thus, many of the young defendants, mostly between the ages of 15 and 19, had to spend the night in a jail cell while the solicitors secured their release. And during that night, the women within the community cooked food and brought it to the cells for these youngsters. So these women put aside their personal feelings about violence against the state, as well as their opinions as mothers within the community, assuming a maternal role not only for the young men on trial, but for those who came to assist the community from outside of Leeds in its time of need. While the mainstream history books will neglect their stories, their contributions as maternal figures were actually central to political developments in Chapeltown, as the Defence Committee would have been unsuccessful without such support behind the scenes. The local newspaper Chapeltown News reported that the community celebrated the acquittal of the majority, but not all, of the defendants on the 11th of July 1976. And despite the initial struggles to garner widespread support for the defendants, support for those on trial had dramatically increased over the months, and there were celebrations outside of the town hall. Therefore, the contributions of women to the Defence Committee, either through providing care for the defendants and solicitors or helping draft letters and banners of support, these all significantly helped the solicitors secure such a rare result within the courtroom. This was during a time when most black men were just sent straight to jail, they weren't acquitted rarely. So this presentation has documented the role that women played within community activism, a role that was often gendered by the Association of Women with a Maternal Function. Some women, those who either were politically activists or those who were just ordinary housewives, to borrow Beach's phrasing, they stepped forward to defend young people, whether it be the children who were being taught by racist teachers or the teenagers and young adults who were fed up with encountering hostility from the police. The gendered expectations attached to women within the community ensured that the care of children was often perceived as their responsibility. As a result, some women on occasion utilised or supported confrontational means such as strikes and uprisings in the name of the children and youngsters of the community. Therefore, activism in Leeds should be used as an example of the multitude of ways in which women campaign for their rights and the rights of black people in Britain. It can help us consider how engagement in different forms of activism is often more fluid than we describe. These case studies revealed that some women agreed with the rhetoric of black power when they sought to challenge a racist school, but they didn't really engage further with it, or they didn't support the violence of the bonfire night incident. Therefore, we and historians more broadly should remember that just because one person was involved in one radical act, that's not always an indicator of their political views. Militant action, it wasn't always carried out with violence or solely by young men in black leather jackets wielding AK-47s. Sometimes it was carried out by old women in skirts in between working a job and looking after their families. Perhaps these conclusions can help us reconsider how we label activists and their activism, which would strengthen our understanding of how resistance operated in the 1970s. If you'd like to know more about my work, I have written an article on the Bonfire Night Uprising for History Today magazine and a blog post about the process of conducting my research for Women's History Network. Both are available to read online for free. My chapter on black women and the politics of community activism in Chapeltown in the 1970s will be published later this year in a collection on black British histories edited by Professor Hakeem Addy. So that's me finished with the presentation. But I just wanted to share some of these photographs with you. I'll go through them. Because these were recently discovered by Historic England. They're actually photographs of the West Indian Centre in April 1983. They've been previously unseen. And we're going to put together a workshop or some kind of event at the West Indian Centre, hopefully sometime in October, invite you all in to take a look at these pictures. We're going to be conducting oral history interviews as well to try and capture recollections of the event and also just histories of Chapeltown in general. So I thought I'd just share some of them with you so you can have a look, but there's actually maybe 50 to 60 photographs altogether. And as you can see, they're quite fantastic. I'm really looking forward to sharing these with you. So I just thought I'd advertise briefly. If you'd like to know more information, let me know. But the details are still to be confirmed. I don't actually know if I'm meant to speak about it yet, but I'm doing it anyway. So there you are. But thank you very much.
You know the score. Black family health matters, and that's for sure. High blood pressure, feeding distress, cancer and strokes too. No food in your belly, but you're drinking too. Too much sugar, they say, it's no good. COVID's on the rise in our neighbourhood. Swollen ankles, what's gone wrong? Heart disease, so many other problems going on. Everyone's health matters. I repeat that, everyone's health matters, no matter what colour or creed. Put health first and you will succeed. Take in everything you hear today, because Dr. Gorman will see you on your way.
Charity shop, and every time I see an outfit that I like, it's either too big or too small. So I spoke to my great-grandmother, and she said, darling, what you can't fix, spoil. So I saw this little jumper, and I said, I'm not leaving it in the shop. So I bought it. What's it 50 quid they sell me for? And they go watch my face and say I'm hungry. So they can't take too much money from me for food, for clothes. So I bought a jumper, so I'm wearing it. You like it? Yes. I'm not indecently dressed, I'm properly covered. I'm in style, because I can't walk around in jeans all the time. You know, one way I found to raise money, so that I don't have to spend what the little pension coming in, see? I just go, any of you in here know something they used to call penny concert in the Caribbean? In Montreal, where I'm from, on a Sunday afternoon, before television came, they used to have village concerts. Some of them they call penny concert. You go up, anybody in the audience can volunteer to go up and do an item. And the audience would say, penny to keep them up on the stage, and they put a penny in the box. If they don't like what the person is doing, somebody else call out penny to take her down. So somebody would be going up and down, and they make good money. Well, I used to bring in plenty money. Because I used to go sing. And as a friend of mine used to always tell me, it's not everything is made for everybody. And to tell you the truth, I don't think singing was made for me. But I just sing my heart out and make money. I hear a woman on the TV the other day singing, is it TV or the radio? Something she was on, maybe in Alexa, singing, I can buy myself flowers. So I tell her, yeah, I can buy myself flowers. Because the boyfriend broke up with her. So she crying now to say, I don't have to wait on him to buy flowers so me I can buy them for myself. I said, woman, stop your lines. You think you're making up song? I always say that. No, I live in so long in the world and only one time, one boyfriend said he buying flowers for me. When I think it's flowers, one artificial red rose. So I wanted to tell him, get one just like that. Just like that. Just like this the man gave me. So darling, always remember I love you. If I have it still, it's over 20 years now I have it.
amazing. Okay, so what I'm going to do, some of the people obviously aren't with us, but the families are here, so we're going to read little bits out of the book, okay? Right, so the first one we're going to have, this is in the members of Katie Stewart. I'm going to call Paulette. Is she available?
Are you going?
Can I round of applause, please, Paulette?
Yeah. Are you going? No, are you going?
Good evening everybody. This is my, as I call her, my old lady, my dearest darling mother, Catherine Elizabeth Stewart. And it's just really appreciated the opportunity that somebody's taken the time to include or to set this celebration up together, because the book, which was written in 1992 when our ship comes in, it was my mother that suggested the title, and the legacy of the women, the work, the book lives on, and I'm extremely proud. My mother, bless her, her birthday she was born on the 2nd of June 1931, and she died on the 2nd of June 2020. She made a graceful exit on her birthday, and I'm extremely proud of her. And I think it's only when somebody passes you realise the footprint and the value and the legacy of who they were, the highs, the lows. So very honoured to be here this evening. And I wanted just to read a small extract of something she wrote and she typed up. This is when people used to type on typewriters. And it's as if she's interviewing herself. I won't read it all, but the opening introduction is: Katie Stewart, Katie who? Catherine Elizabeth Stewart is an anonymous woman of no particular significance, or, for that matter, no importance. Or so it would seem, for within this small spark of a lady is a towering inferno of strength and survival. So those are her words. Now what she's done, she's interviewed herself, and the first question is, describe yourself, Catherine. Ooh, call me Katie, please. I'm a black woman, quite conscious of being a woman with a lot of get up and go. There are times when I feel as if my get up and go has gone without me. At times I'm down, and at other times I'm up. But at least I'm not defeated. When did you develop your get up and go? And as my mother said, she developed her get up and go in her 50s. But in reality, I think she had that get up and go from the minute she decided she was going to leave home and come to England and make a life. And I'm very proud of her, proud of the fact that the book meant after that she went on to do other things at the Grand Theatre, the West Yorkshire Playhouse. She did her Emmerdale, she did Frost, she did Cracker, the little black woman in the background. That was my old lady, my dear darling mother. So thank you very much. And she would be so chuffed and so proud. And I'm very pleased that somebody's taken the time to reflect what seems like an age ago, a generation ago, 1992, 1993. She was all part of that, empowerment of little people getting together and having a voice. So thank you very much, Nia, for organising that. Over to Marilyn. Thank you.
Nia would like to present you with a One Heart Award. Okay, have you got it? Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. The next one, I don't know if you remember a wonderful lady. She was as strong as an ox, Mrs. Bernard. Oh, yeah. And she was a big part of the book. What a wonderful lady, a good friend as well. And she's amazing, and I love her so much. And may she rest in sweet peace. Now her son Dennis is here, and I'm sure he's got a lot to say about this wonderful woman.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honour to be here. I'm not Marilyn, by the way. Okay. My sister from down in Northampton is supposed to be here today. She rang me yesterday to say, Dennis, I can't make it. So I'm standing in for her. I'm just going to read. My mum passed away last year. She had a funeral last year in October, 7th of October. And my mother was an amazing woman. She brought 7 wonderful children. the best of all is obviously me. No, just joking. I'm just going to read just a small extract from her book. I've got this book, and it's signed by all the ladies at the front. Okay? Which is amazing. Alright, let me see if I can see it though. Alright, so it only took Bud Light. Alright, there we go. It only took time. It only took time in my life. The only time in my life that I thank you. Let there be light, there is light. The only time in my life that I could tell I was a gunner is when my husband died. That's the only time. What I have gone through, I would not like my worst enemy to go through it, because I felt I was down in the bottom of a pit. At one point, I was in my house and my settee for 3 days, and I could not move. And when I searched myself, I said, Joyce, it is not like you. Why is it you are so depressed? You've always been strong, a strong woman. And I got up, had a bath, left the house, went on the parade, and felt a little better. It was God Himself that put it in me to get up and go. But never before had I felt like that. Not even in all the years bringing up my 7 children. And it was my yoke to bring up 7 children and to get them well educated. Through my whole life, my husband never left my side. I was 18 when we got married, and we were together for 37 years. He wasn't only my husband, he was my best friend when he died. It was like a big tree that was cut down, that was cut in two. The same day he was given a diagnosis, in the same, within 4 weeks, he passed. So the shock of getting the diagnosis, the shock of knowing that he's going to die, and nursing him for 3 weeks, and the shock of his death was all that I could handle. The only way I've learned to survive is to block out the hurt and keep on working. I'm nearly there. When I was bringing up my children, sometimes I would get up at 5:30 and wouldn't go to bed again until midnight. Sometimes it was because I had to do it for the reason I never stopped. For this reason I never stopped. And it was because I was blocking out the hurt. Instead of tranquilizers and taking tablets, I block out the hurt by working. I'm going to stop there. There's lots more that my mom's written, but I just want to talk a little bit about who my mother was, just briefly. And again, it's something that I have to put together very quickly. And I've written this. Giants, my mom and the ladies in this book were giants on whose shoulders we stand. Sorry. It's all right. Pioneer. They were pioneers. A person or a group that explores new areas throughout and activities. Someone who sees potential, an innovator who's willing to try new things. Someone who pushes boundaries, that was a mother, to advance a cause or an idea, who experiences success most of the time and overcoming great challenges while doing it. Mom, Mrs. Bernard always said, with hard work, you can achieve anything. You only fail if you give up. She was a hard worker. At times she had 3 jobs to ensure that we had food on the table, and we were always well presented. She always said to us, education, education, education was her motto. She pleaded all her children, make sure when you go to school, you work hard. when you go to further education, you work hard. She did not want any of us to experience what she experienced when she came to this country, or indeed any other children. How long have I got?
I thought, Mum, you probably just didn't know you were facing a bit of racism and discrimination, but that's what she wrote. If any little thing happened, she would just forget it. Like if we went to the market and somebody would say, why don't you go back? What have you come here for? Go back to the jungle. I didn't let it worry me, Mum said. At one time, she used to be afraid and to look into the bag to see if they'd given her any bad food. And if they did, I just asked them to change it or ask for my money back. I would like to be remembered as someone that you can pass and say hello to. If you want to approach me, you know you can. And as my children's mother, when my boys were children, 3 of their friends would come on their way to school and I'd always give them breakfast. I remember 2 of them in particular because their mum had to go to work early. One of them used to be full of cold and he would arrive and I would say, but wait, what's wrong with you? Your nose always running, come here. I would clean his nose and give him breakfast. I took those boys today and I'm grateful that I did because although I don't see them very often, when they see me they talk to me, and how they would talk is how they would talk to their mother, talk to me with respect. There's one in London, and I think to myself, if I didn't let the child into my home, I'm sure he would think that I was a bad woman. So I'm thankful to God for that. That's just a short extract, and that's just the way Mum wrote it. And to me, that's just showing the love that our parents had. I don't know if we do that now. if our children or family members came and they saw somebody with a runny nose or they didn't have breakfast, do we still do that? Do we still reach out and say, come, let me give you some breakfast? I know some people would, but some of the tradition has gone, and we need to reinstate that, I think. We need to look out for each other. We need to look out for each other's children. We need to look out for each other's family members, if we get on with them or not. We need to start loving and we need to start sharing again. So that's the Mum when she was married, very pretty. Okay, that's me in the bottom corner, very cute. Anyway, that's Mum. Mum is 91 now. I was talking to somebody earlier. She's on no medication whatsoever, apart from glaucoma, drops in her eyes. And it's a bit of a joke, I'm just going to say it because I'm just going to be me. But I'm her carer, and I said to somebody, I don't know what it is, but she don't have no stretch marks, she don't have no varicose veins, she don't have no crusty heels, she don't have no cellulite, she's not on any medication. The other day I said, sit up, Mum, and she was lying down and she just went like this. I said, Mum, where are you getting them 6-pack from? And there's something about the older folk, not just physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, there's something about them. So while we've got them, harness them, take care of them, love them, share them, appreciate them. And I've had to go through a difficult time initially, but I wouldn't give anything for my mum, to tell the truth right now, because I just love her to bits. She's just so funny. She's sharper than I've ever known her to be. The other day she called me a word I've never heard her call before, and I was like, Mum, where have you learned that from? She's so pretentious, she's sleeping, and then she opens her eyes and says things. But let's love each other. If it's and I'm going to read the bit where it says loneliness. Agnes Hines, there she's cooking at the West Indian Centre. Yeah. So, first my husband died in 1982. As the time goes on, the children have grown up, and all of them have gone. Dave, Bev, Angela and Roy Jr. We called him Roy Jr. because his dad was Roy too. Since my husband died, I find it hard. After 10 years, on the 24th of February, I still find it hard to give him up. It still hurts. Trusting in the Lord is what is keeping me from day to day, along with the church at Roscoe. The members there were good, loving and kind to me. Mary Sadler, Georgina Webb, Vincent Francis. These are the names that was most close to me, but there was a lot more that really cared. I always pray for my church and the church members that God will help always to be with them. In my bereavement, I had Ralph Maynard, Mrs. White, and the people from the Barbados Association was a help to me, especially my friends. That was a good ear for me to listen. Mrs. Millington and her husband. And then she goes on to talk about the loss of her husband in Barbados. There's another little bit. Who remembers Agnes? Excellent, okay. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, but there's another page. Okay, sorry, I've been told a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to pause there with Agnes, and then the other one very quickly is a lady called Jean White. Jean White didn't have any children, and I think just her husband's around at the moment, but he's not able to obviously be here. But Jean White, she was, I believe she was one of the first black midwives in West Yorkshire. Yes. And she was also the assistant to the Lord Mayoress at some point. Yes. She also had a Sunday school. She was also, I think, secretary of the Barbados Association, and a lot more other things. I remember Jean just busy doing so many things within the community. I can't remember all of the things, but I'm just going to read a little extract about her. I take my hat off to her because I remember so much as well. She would always... I was a bit of a shy person, believe it or not, when I was young, but when she used to pick us up in the minibus to go to Sunday school, she'd say, come, it's okay. I don't know if I was crying, but I always remember her putting her arm around me. And right up until, you know, me being older, she's always been there. So, where are we? Jean White. Okay. Jean White. Okay, I was born in Arch Hall in St Thomas, Barbados on the 13th of July, 1930. When I was 20, I started nursing work at Barbados in the mental hospital. In those days, we were called female attendants. I progressed well and was awarded a scholarship to train at Claybury Hospital in Essex as a registered mental health nurse. I followed this by future training to become a SRN. It was then I fell in love and decided to stay in England. But from that day, I always felt a commitment to work among my own community here. In 1960, I started work at St James's Hospital in Leeds as a staff nurse trained in the psyche block. Then we were beginning to build on in 1959 the Mental Health Act. I joined in July 1960, 1 week after getting married, and at that time I was the first black woman on the female side. In those days they called the racism the colour bar. Okay. And I came across a few instances which were labelled as chips on the shoulder. But I was able to bounce back from every chip because the quality of my nursing and because of my belief in myself and my determination to change the system for the ones in similar positions as myself, I was determined I would do my duty, and I found my work so satisfying to the patients and other members of staff. But when it got to that bit for promotion, well then it was different. There was an occasion when I applied for a job and I would get a reply almost by return of post, which said that it was felt that I was not up to the standard required. I didn't know I had it in me, but I went to see the doctor in charge of the unit. I looked straight at him and I said, I would like to know the standard that is required so I may achieve it. For a moment he couldn't say anything, and then he started to ask, how did you get on with the sisters by name? That sister by name, that person by name. I told him that there were some I got on with all right, but there were some who I didn't get on with all right. Then I went back to the ward, but I didn't say anything to the sisters who were in charge. But the doctor came down, went into the office and had a word with them. When he came out, things were rather quiet on the ward for a while. And that was my first opportunity to stand up for myself, because I knew I was not an inferior person. I wanted to know what the standard was so I could attain it, and then I could get my promotion. There were other times when I felt I would not be able to go back to the unit the next door. One shift I was working with a part-time sister who didn't have a psychiatric training. I was sitting with the patient and... Sorry, are we there? Am I okay? Okay. And when she walked into the ward, I didn't stand up. The next day, I had occasions to see an assistant matron about some overtime that I had done. The assistant matron said to me quite harshly, what is this I hear about you not standing up last night when the sister came onto the ward? The sister in question was off duty, so I knew that she could not have said anything. So my defence was, has this sister told you this? When the sister tells you this, I will defend it. I was so cross that I came down from the back corridor of the main office on the corridor side, and I just shouted out. I stood up and put my hands in my kimbo, and I said, the trouble with this place is the seniors are too mixed up and inferior. And when the inferior are told to go up, they go. And when they are told to go down, they go. But I can't stand on my own 2 feet. There was silence after that, after my outburst. But the sisters in charge of that day said quietly to several people, Staff Nurse White, she is emotional. She's so emotional. And I felt drained, as if I couldn't lift anything or go back to work the next day. Shall I continue? I went home and told my husband, Owen, about how the day went, and I could see he was upset. But you can't just leave like that, my dear, he said. First of all, you need to get another job. He calmed me down while I went back the next day. And I remained through it all until I retired in 1986. In 1967, I went to work on the male acute ward. I brought a certain sort of softness to the job and to the patients, until the patients began to act differently. Little things that meant a lot to patients I looked after and saw to. For instance, one patient was a bit depressed and wanted to have a short walk to the top of the street and to the gate. So I dealt with that very delicately, and he got his satisfaction. There was another occasion when a West Indian person on the hot day wanted some ice in the water, but I had to fight to get the ice because the charge nurse went as far as to take away the ice pan. The situation I find hardest to tackle are when things seem to be one-sided amongst them, devilish. I find it difficult when I cannot handle something in a gentle way. Like the charge nurse looking at the ice pan. Such a simple thing for someone to be so hard about. Then there was the lady who was newly married and her husband was very, very ill, and we had him on medication. I found it difficult to keep to the rules that said she was not to see her husband, so I let her have a peep. I felt I should stand up. That may be against the grain, but I felt it was the right thing to do. Although those years, all the way through those years, I was building and building and building for work, until then in 1972 I was given the blue uniform to be charge nurse. When I put it on, I felt at last I'm here. So
it's good to say that
so there's myself, Marilyn, who's the eldest daughter, the eldest and the only daughter, and my brother Hugh with a pink mobile. Naya, thank you for having this event. It's fabulous. I was just talking to somebody saying it's so important that we harness and try and keep a hold of what has been laid down, but it's also just as important to pass the baton. And I know in this day and age it's very difficult to pass the baton to certain generations or certain family members in certain communities. But I just want to encourage you that as you're hearing and seeing and watching and listening and reflecting, that you don't just let this be a great event, but pass the baton on to your child, your neighbour, your friend, your children at the school, etc., etc. Because what we've learned and what we're learning, what I'm going to talk about here a bit with when our ship comes in with the ladies, it's their life that they're passing on to us, and we can learn so much from it, and we can be better people for it, and we can appreciate and be grateful where we are today. So, mention my name's Marilyn Davis, and my mum Elaine Davis. I don't know if you can see this. Is it okay for me just to read all the names? Just say. So we have Agnes Hines, who is no longer with us. And I'm calling the names because each of these ladies, I'm sure you know the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Right? And each of these ladies on here have been like my auntie or my mum. Particularly Sister Bernard. I've done a lot with her. Mrs. Stout, Jean White, Mrs. Comrie, Katie Stewart, Agnes Hines. They've all been very, very close to me. Unfortunately, my mum's the last one standing. She's 91, she's at home, but they've all passed something on to me, and I intend to try and pass it on to whoever I need to, my nieces, my nephews, and friends, and yourselves. So I'm just going to read a little extract from Elaine Davis. I think Dennis and Paulette, I just reiterate everything that they've said about their mums, and add that to my mum as well. So, approach me as my children's mother, Elaine Davis. When I came to live in Chapeltown, I was probably lucky because my husband was already here. A good friend of ours used to look after my daughter, and at the time, we were able to get a bedsit just across the road from her. I was really thinking to have a house, so after our second child was born, we found a back-to-back. It was still in the area, but more in Harehill side, and we didn't have any trouble getting a mortgage. Honestly speaking, I think I've been very privileged, and I found it quite easy to get a job, because I used to do sewing. I worked at one place for a few weeks putting in zips, and then I went to work at Hurst & Sanders on Regent Street making coats. I have 3 children, and I worked hard and brought them up in the best way I knew at the time that I could. probably if I was bringing them up today, I would encourage them to be more outgoing because they were very protected. They were always very manly, and they still are, thank God for that. I brought them up in the Church of England. My daughter now worships where she wants to worship. I myself visit a Pentecostal church sometimes and go to the Church of England. I don't think I have suffered in any way much inconvenience or racism in the air or anything about them. Take a hold of it, pass it on, speak to the family members, and let us be an example also to pass the baton on to the next generation. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's wonderful. Okay, the next one, okay, sorry, Marion, if you collect the award for... Okay, moving on swiftly, Odessa Stout, she was an amazing woman. I remember back in the day, she used to raise a lot of money for charity, and she used to do lots of swimming, as far as I remember, yeah? And so, so this One Heart Award obviously goes to Odessa Stout. And Heather, are you going to read a little bit out of the book? Thank you. A round of applause for Heather, please. Come down.
Go ahead, Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Springer. Most of you know me as Jeannie Stout. So different from Mum, because she would have revelled in all of this. And personally, I don't like this sort of thing at all. But she was the bane of my life, is how I would like to describe my mum, seriously. When I was growing up, we were like cat and dog. Couldn't put us in a room together because she used to drive me absolutely crazy. But Mum's been gone now 8 years, and I never thought that I would actually miss her. But I miss her. I miss her deeply. I miss the early morning phone calls to ask me stupid things. And I miss the fact that she could annoy me, but yet, if she wanted something and she rang me, it didn't matter when she rang me, I would make sure that I went and did what she wanted. Mum was an activist. And I remember, and I don't know how many of you remember the when all those women marched on Cowper Street School to get rid of what they saw was a racist headmaster. And I remember my mum being at the front of that march with me beside her, and I'm thinking, oh God, I'm never going to live this down. But they did it. They did it. They got rid of that headmaster. They changed things at Cowper Street School. And she loved to do those sort of things. She was always on the ball and very much in everything. And so it came as no surprise when she took part in this. So I'm going to read you a small extract of what she wrote. And it's called Arriving in England. Descending down the steps of the aeroplane and shuffling along the tarmac, thinking to myself, what on earth have I done? The most heartbreaking event in my life, leaving my two daughters, aged 8 and 2 years old, back home with my mother and my father and 2 brothers, to join my husband, who had come just 4 months ahead of me. The plane had taken 14 hours from leaving Barbados to Heathrow, stopping and refueling and changing crew. It was an autumn morning, September 16, 1961. Looking around at the massive area of the airport and the planes and the building calmed my mind for the moment. Walking to the terminal seemed as if I had walked around my country. Reaching the immigration department and going through the procedures, my first shock was seeing all those white people doing what I call menial jobs, like porters and cleaners. A white man came up to me asking questions like, "Where are you going? Is someone meeting you?" He took my luggage on a trolley and started off. He walked so fast. To keep up with him, I had to keep running. Outside the massive building, there were lines of cars. I remember having to look up, and on what looked like a veranda, I saw someone in the crowd, like my husband, who had come to meet me. But how was I to get to him? When the white man stopped, I told him. He started asking me a lot of questions, and most of them I could not answer. Anyhow, he said he would try and get my husband, but he didn't return. Standing there with only a light jumper, I felt very cold. Other people started coming and going. Suddenly, I saw my husband coming towards me and another man, who he said was a friend. This friend had been in England for around 2 years, and he worked on the railway, so he knew what had to be done. As it was getting late, we eventually got in what I call a car taxi, which took us on a very long journey. I heard the friend say to the driver, "King's Cross," which I didn't understand, but I thought I would be home soon after such a long and tiresome day and night. Reaching this place was a big surprise, seeing all those enormous trains and so many white people and the jobs they were doing. Walking along on this long path, brackets platform, to get to the train, which the friend wanted, was another thing. In the end, we got on. What a blessing. My husband said, "We're going to Leeds." "Leeds?" I said, "Where is that?" "You'll see," the friend replied. On our way, the sun was brightly shining, and all I could see was wasteland. When we came to buildings, there was all this dreadful smoke coming from them. I never asked much questions at that time. I was too tired to talk. After so many hours of rocking and rolling around and the train stopping at places, we reached what was called Leeds. It was dark by now. So there again, another car took us eventually to what was called home. Coming from my country, that was the greatest surprise. I'd never seen houses like these before, all joined together. I began to get upset, and I remember crying. At the house where I was to stay, there were so many people living there. The very friend that came with my husband lived there. There were people I never knew before. It was very late in the night, so my husband made something for me to eat, and we went to bed. Next morning, being Sunday, everyone was at home. There it started. I was introduced to another member of the group, everyone coming and going in and out of the kitchen, toilet all over the house, no privacy. Coming from my own home, with only myself, husband and 2 children, I couldn't get adjusted, so I started to get homesick. I started crying again. Worse was to come. On Monday morning, my husband had to go to work, and everyone in the house as well. I had been warned on the Sunday not to go out or open the door when I was left alone. I just stayed in until my husband came home. The day was as long as reaching Britain to me.
Wrote in the book, she's a good contributor, and yes, that's it.
Hi everybody. I think everybody knows Georgina. Everybody knows about Auntie Jean.
Yeah.
And is actually my Auntie Jean. I think this is a point that she written is called Is Freedom Coming? Is freedom coming? Human exploitation, oppression, poverty, racism, prejudice, disparity, violence, attitudes, stereotypes, minorities, destruction, injustice, self-esteem is at stake, something's going to break, so rise. That is one of the points that she wrote at the time.
Powerful.
Yeah, I think that is the last part of the hymn. But as I was saying, she is actually my auntie, and I've known her literally like from birth. But I think everybody knows Georgina, Auntie Jean from all the community because she's done so much work in this community. Everybody knows her, if not through the church, through when she used to work at Oscar Nursery, and all these other places that she's been and helped out in. So I think that is Auntie Jean through and through, and she's still there now, and she'll always be there as long as she lives.
Amen. Amen. Give back the book, just last check.
That book is hot property. Okay. I don't know if you all remember, there was a lady called Mother Conway. Yeah. And she had a big house, she had lots of children, and she was a strong, bold Christian. And so I believe Carol Conway has sent an audio for you to listen to. So it's not too long, but yeah. And she was a strong, bold Christian woman. And okay. I believe she grew up in a Pentecostal church, Mrs. Conway. Have you all filled in your quizzes, the answers and everything? Yeah. On the tables? Yeah. Okay, so then listen to an audio from Carol Conway. Remember to Mrs. Conway.
Land of hope and glory.
I'm not going to read it.
Look how thick it is. I can't get my hands around it. Look at that.
It's very good if your table leg drop off. It will stabilize it. This book is 30 years of me working in the community. And I heard the word tonight, legacy. This is a legacy for my children and my grandchildren. As it said, when I went into the community, there were only 3 black midwives. And I worked in the community for over 30 years. And when I retired, there was only 1 black midwife. Which means they didn't recruit any black midwives. And this book, you don't have to buy it. You can go to the library, because it's in the library, and order it. Let me put that down, because this book is heavy. Don't ever attempt to read it in bed. But in here, it will tell you I've had a very good career, but it was fraught with racism. It was fraught with challenges. But I'm a committed Christian, and it's because of God why I survived. Because every situation that I encountered racism, I had to ask God to help me to overcome it. If I had time, I'd read you something, because I am not quiet. And but in those days, I couldn't really say what I wanted to say.
But in here, and it's in chapter 4, I went for an interview with my manager. And during the interview, she said to me, there's a lesson here. What do you see yourself doing in 10 years? So what was my answer? Your job. And after that, my career just went down. Because every senior post that came up, I would apply for it, but I wouldn't get it. There were no black supervisor of midwives, and my manager knew this. And she called me in her office one day and she said, apply for this post. And I said, no, because I won't get it. She says, yes, you will. So I applied for it. Right there in her office, I filled out the form. And I'm sure when I closed the door on my way out, the form went straight in the bin. Because on the panel to appoint a black supervisor, guess who was the chair? My manager. So I knew I wasn't going to get it. But what I started doing was every vacancy I saw, I would apply for them. Knowing that John Well didn't want them, but I just wanted to prove that I was not going to be promoted. However, I didn't want to be an office person. I'm a people person. So I was just provoking them. Last month, February, no, when I published this book 2 years ago, 2020, the first person that received a copy the director of midwifery. She never responded. February, I got a letter from the director of midwifery apologizing for the way I was treated as a midwife. And I'm only human. So I sat down and wrote a letter. And I gave it to my son, who is very sensible. And he says, Mother, don't send that letter. He said, what you need to do is to acknowledge the letter and say, thank you for, I received your letter, thank you for making contact. If there's anything I can do to help you in the future, please feel free to ask. And I think that's the better of the two options. Because I am absolutely sure this woman would have sued me for the things that I wrote in it.
Truth.
I won't read, but on the 25th of May, if you want to know what's some of the things, and I think a couple of people in here have read this book. I've been brave enough to pick it up. You can also get it on Kindle. It's £3 something on Kindle. So if you have a Kindle or a reader, it's worth reading because, as I said, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Even when I retired, when you retire, you're supposed to get a package. And I retired in the June, and I think I didn't get the package until about the August. They couldn't even give me my money when I retired. I kind of think these people either were racist, I kind of think, yeah, I'll never accuse them of being racist, or they don't like people to challenge them. As I said, I've written it for my children, and the thing that I've said to my boys, because I have 2 boys, is don't ever let your color be a prison. Stand up. I want them to know who I am. So I can't tell you anymore because time has gone, but it's worth a read. It is worth a read, even though I didn't say it myself. as I said, there were only 4 black midwives. Now, there's still only 1 black midwife. I have written and asked, why aren't you recruiting black midwives? I could read the letter to you, but I didn't get a response. So I want to encourage young people to go into midwifery. It's a worthwhile career. You know, when I did mine, my first pay was something like £5, way back there. But go into it, it's because now I see people out there who have thanked me. And when I retired, I have a box filled with thank you cards. So I did enjoy my career. So I won't tell you anymore. I'll just leave you hanging. But get this book. And incidentally, I've got another book too. I've now turned to writing. So I'm writing a book about the things that I've done in Leeds since I've come to Leeds, because you could only get a snippet from there. So I'm done.
Well done, thank you. Okay, I promise I will read the book. It'll take me about 3 years, it's I think.
So I just wanted to kind of start with, I was going to do it as I was coming up, but I'm just going to do it now. So, the sun goes down, the stars come out, and all that counts is here and now. My universe will never be the same. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you came. So I just wanted to sing that from the one thing. I was going to sing it was coming up, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it now. So I've got my paper here just in case. I'm old school, so there's no iPad and, you know, the young people, it's so lovely. So I really wanted to say, the reason why I say I'm the manifestor of dreams, because I manifested this. And I know it sounds a bit crazy, but I always wanted to speak to an audience. I didn't really know if I'd have anything to say, but as the time's gone on, I've kind of prepared, and like Patricia was saying, I've been on social media and I do Facebook Lives once a week, and just talking about positive things really, and just keeping people uplifted. So there's a famous quote by Les Brown, and if I can remember, he says, it's better to be prepared and not have an opportunity than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. So I kind of was thinking about that. So the reason why I say Manifesto of Dreams is because I went many years ago and I listened to a lady called Zena, and you may well know her. Is it Gooding Broderick? Yeah. I know you know her. And I was really inspired and I thought, I want to do that. So I prayed about it, and at the time, if anyone had asked me, I wasn't prepared. So I don't think I would have been ready. But as I've sort of prepared myself, and I prayed that someone would ask me to do it. And Patricia, bless her, she asked me, because I thought, I don't really want to go knocking on people's doors saying, can I talk? But she asked me, and I'm really grateful for that. So today it's just talking about preparing for the storm. Are you prepared? And I don't mean the weather. I mean things like illness, or things like, you know, there might be a breakup in a relationship, or you may lose someone, or you may lose a job. And it's just about, are you prepared? And no one wants that. No one wants to lose someone. No one wants to be ill. But it's like, what do you do to keep yourself uplifted? So what I tend to do, I've written a list of things that make me happy, because I know the storm's coming. So when it comes, how can I keep myself uplifted? And it's about, do you speak to friends that uplift you? Because we all know there's someone out there who drains you. You know, people, they know who they are, and you know if you get a call, most of the time it's about them. It's nothing to do with you, it's what can I get from you? I'm asking you for something. And sometimes I say to people, you know what, look at the number, don't answer it. Because if it's going to drain you, just don't do it. I'm going to make sure I check my paper because I don't want to. No, I'm going to tell you. Yes, you need to be prepared. So I've got my paper here, so I'm just going to make sure because I don't want to miss anything out. Now, I think, do you invest in you? So I pray, I talk to God all the time. Sometimes I think God is a bit fed up with me and thinking, really, seriously, Emma, are you back again? I've got other people to deal with. I pray. Are we grateful for things? You know, so I've got a journal and I write in it and I'll say, do you know what, I'm really grateful that I saw the sun came up today. I'm really grateful that someone gave me a lovely compliment today. And I do that because when the storm comes and when you're having a bad day and when you're not kind of 100%, if you look back in that journal, it just reminds you of really, of all the good things in your life. Yeah, bless. So yeah, it definitely reminds you of all the good things that are happening in your life. So just to do that. And I always think no matter what's happening, there's always something to be grateful for. It doesn't matter what. I don't want to forget, I want to make sure that I've got everything. And I was thinking, what makes you happy? And I asked someone this the other day, I said, what makes you happy? And he said, you know what, I don't know. I don't actually know what makes me happy. And this is aside from, obviously we love our family, we love our children, but it's what just makes you happy, because once I learned that it was no one's job to make me happy, then I kind of decided, right, what makes me happy? And I say to my friend over here, my sister Gillian, I love watching Alvin and the Chipmunks. And I just love it because Alvin always gets into so much trouble. I just love it. She's always, and I was saying, Gillian, you need to watch it. She said, no, I really don't need to watch it. But that makes me happy. I love going for walks. Honestly, I love listening to music, I love singing, I love dancing, I love doing all sorts of things, and that's just for me. So if I'm not 100%, I think, right, okay, let me just sing and dance like no one's watching. Let me listen to a motivational speech, let me call someone. And sometimes if they're not in, because you put it on them because you want them to be in. I'm not feeling well, they should be there to answer the phone. That's how I feel. They should know that I'm ringing them, and they should know that I want them to answer the phone because I need to speak to them. And it's like, but if they're not there, what do you do? So it is, for me, it's about praying and it's about doing things, going for a walk, because you can't really depend on people to be there all the time when you want them to be there, although you kind of love them to be there. Let me have a look, I just want to make sure. Now, I've had many storms, as I'm sure many of you have, and one of my storms was kind of becoming a full-time carer of my mum. It was like overnight. She became ill in, wow, that sounds wild. She became ill in December 2019, and at first I was kind of feeling a bit sorry for myself, because, you know, you've got your life and we think that we've got all these things to do, but you know what? Our parents have been here for us and they've paved the way, and we are standing on the shoulders of giants. And, you know, I've learned so many things today about so many people. And there's a quote by the late Wayne Dyer, and it says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now, I kind of feeling sorry for myself, and I prayed and I had to have a word with myself. And once I had that word with myself, I thought, you know what, you are blessed to still have your mom. Because there are many people out there.
Go for it.
That would, I'm going to do it. There are many people out there, thank you, darling, that would love to have their moms here. And so once I looked at it like that and looked at it as a blessing and not a challenge, it was just so exciting. And me and my mum, we have jokes, you know, all of us. She's got so much lyrics. She still comes out with things. She's 92 and she still comes out with some things that I think, Mum, really? Seriously? She said, well, you know me. I'm telling the truth. And sometimes there are things that you really want to say but you don't say it, but Mum will say it. She said, well, she'll be like, if they don't like it, it's tough. Yeah, she says it how it is. So, you know, I've been through many storms, as I'm sure you all have, and that has been my storm among others. And I love Peter, Run the Rhythm. I said I'm going to say that, I'm just so tempted. Right, so Run the Rhythm, so it's life lessons. So if you listen to this song, I'm going to come back after this. I might just stay here and have a little dance.
Oh, I thought you were going to sing.
No, I'm not going to sing, no. I'm not going to sing. But this for me, it just kind of encompasses everything, and it is about life lessons, and it is about people going through challenges. It's Life Lessons by Jamil. Yeah. So I'd like you to listen to this and just take it in and just kind of, you know, understand. For me, this is a thing for me. Yeah, I'm ready. Run the rhythm. I like saying that. Run the rhythm. It's not long. It's only about 2 minutes. It's not long at all. But it does. It just makes me, when I hear this, it's just about reflection and just sitting and thinking what's happening. Am I making informed decisions? And so I'm not rushing to make decisions. I don't make decisions at night. I don't make decisions when I'm tired. I don't make decisions when I'm happy. And I don't make decisions when I'm sad. Because we make these decisions and sometimes we regret making these decisions. But if you're neutral and you kind of reflect, then it's like you make that decision, most of the time you probably won't go back on it. So I'm sure at some point he's going to run the rhythm. I love saying that. I love it.
And you sound good too.
I love it.